Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grooving and Giving in Retirement. I'm Radhika, and thank you for your time. This channel is for people who are retired early or are looking to retire early, want to make a difference in the world, and want to learn about financial freedom, the glue that makes the other two things possible. I left my career retiring before I turned 50 to focus on my passion, my NGO, A Childhood for Children. A Childhood for Children fulfills the basic needs of children by providing essential items to children in impoverished and underserved communities. And this year, my NGO is turning 13. Wow, who would have thunk it? Now, let me ask you all a question. As a child, did you dream of anything super big? And then when you became an adult, you kind of had all these doubts about whether you could make that dream a reality? Well, I certainly did. And that dream was to trek to Everest Base Camp. So I put it off as long as I could till I left my job and I looked at my bucket list, and there were 3 items remaining on my bucket list: Kilimanjaro, Everest Base Camp, and Antarctica. It was time to pony up. I did Kilimanjaro in 2021, and there's a separate video on how I conquered Kilimanjaro. I'll put a link in the description below. In this video, I would like to share with you my epic trek to Everest Base Camp. So we bought the Everest Base Camp trek with an overnight at Everest Base Camp, and it was 17 days. We purchased the trip through Icicles Adventure Treks and Tours, a Nepalese company in Kathmandu owned by Mrs. Indira Bhatt, who I would highly recommend this company. Look them up. They were really fantastic. Days 1 and 2 were basically time spent in Kathmandu. We actually did a sightseeing and trek preparation trip before the start of our trek to Everest Base Camp, which, believe me, if you are trekking to Everest Base Camp, you want to make sure that all of your trek gear is looked at. And if you're missing anything, this is the time to buy it. Day 3 is when we started our trek. So we flew from Kathmandu to Lukla. Lukla is at approximately 10,000 feet. So you're starting to get high. If you don't know much about the Lukla airport, it is one of the dangerous, craziest airports. The runway is extremely short, and it is in the mountains, and the pilots have to get the landing right and precise because of where the airport is located. We landed in Lukla, we took a short break, and then we started our trek to Pakding. Pakding is the first official stop on the trek, and it is at about 8,700 feet, really high. Once you get to Pakding, the next stop is one of the most hustle-bustle stops. So that's on day 4. We got to Namche Bazaar, and it was an 8.5-hour trek from Pakding. We were acclimatizing and getting our first view of Everest Base Camp. By the way, if you forgot to buy something or you need something that you didn't have, Namche Bazaar is the place you're going to get it at. From Pakding to Namche Bazaar, you go through a lot of suspension bridges, you pass through villages and towns, and a lot of Everest Base Camp trek, by the way, you do see a lot of villagers, you see a lot of kids, stores, so it's very lively, completely different than what we experienced on Kilimanjaro, which is nothing but the mountain. Here you see a lot of activity on the mountain.
What about the other one?
Now, the suspension bridges, I know there are some people who don't like suspension bridges. I find them really cool. They're very sturdy. They're made of steel. they sway a little bit, but believe me, they're safe. So you're not gonna feel like, oh my God, they're gonna fall off. One thing I'll say about Trek to Everest Base Camp, there are a ton of stairs. So one of the best things you can add to your training regiment is stairs, stairs, and more stairs. Okay, in Namche Bazaar, we had an extra day to acclimatize. And so we were able to go and do some additional things in Namche Bazaar. On our acclimatization day, we actually did a side trek and spent 2 nights there. It's a beautiful town, as I said. It even has an Irish pub. How funny is that? Day 6, we left Namche Bazaar and trekked up to Tengboche, and we trekked for about 9 hours. Along the way, we encountered all sorts of yak and mule traffic jams. And also, I should mention that we were trekking for my not-for-profit, A Childhood for Children. We were climbing Everest Base Camp for kids. And so along the way, we were stopping and making videos and pictures of the logos that we were carrying on the mountain. So our treks were a little bit longer. Also, I've mentioned in previous videos, my husband is a photographer and he focuses, amongst other areas, he focuses on wildlife and travel photography. And so we stop and take a lot of pictures. So our times for the treks are could be a little bit longer than if somebody was just trekking. Leaving Tengboche, we trekked up to Dingboche, which is now clocking in at above 14,000 feet, 4,400 meters. And we also had an extra day in Dingboche. It was a side trip to Nagarshunk Hill, which is at 16,728 feet. And it's a steep hill, and it helps acclimatize trekkers to what is yet to come above 17,000 feet. So we were trekking to Nagarshunk Peak, and the day started out really well. The sun was shining. We made a lot of photos, and then the weather turned to sleet and high winds, and the terrain was like very slippery and sliding. Now, I did Everest Base Camp because I had momentum from my Kilimanjaro trip, which had given me some confidence and courage to take on Everest Base Camp. And I had the momentum from my training. So I really didn't want to lose that. And that's why I did these trips pretty much back to back. Kilimanjaro, I summited that in September 2021. And then we reached Everest Base Camp on May 3rd, 2022. So not a lot of time between these two treks. But again, I had so much momentum and confidence built up from Kilimanjaro that I felt like, let me do this now, otherwise I'd never get back to it. Okay, getting back to our trek, we are on day 9, May 1st, Dingboche. I should mention that the day before, after we came down from my grueling experience on Nagarshung Hill, we had a snowstorm in Dingboche. Sitting in the tea house, you looked out of the window and all you saw was just white. There was nothing to see. So we were confined to the tea house. But luckily the next day, day 9, the weather cleared up, and we were so relieved to see that the weather cleared up so that we could trek. It was our 7.5-mile trek from Dingboche to Labuche. And then we moved on a little bit farther from Labuche to the pyramid, which is the Italian research station that looks like it's in the shape of a triangle, and that's why it's called the pyramid. And that's where we were going to be spending our night. So all looked good. And as we crossed the Tukla Pass, everything looked good, weather looked good, but then of course the weather turns nasty quickly. We posted a sticker on the window of a lodge crossing the Tukla Pass for one of our sponsors, Leroy's Place, and then made our way, as we're making our way to the Italian research station, the weather turned really, really nasty. But there's no place to take a break or shelter on, so you just keep going. And I had to use trekking poles because of my knee, and my hands were like blue and black. I mean, it was just starting to turn really bad. And my husband gave me his gloves because he had his hands under his rain parka, whereas my hands were totally exposed out of my rain parka. And let me just tell you, we had to put on our rain gear really, really quickly. That's how quickly the weather can turn nasty in the mountains. We made it to the Italian research station. We were so tired. We literally just took off our trekking boots and went right to sleep. We were so exhausted. At this point, you have 3 more days to Everest Base Camp. Day 10, Lebuche to Gorakshep. The day before was so terrible. We left Lebuche for Gorakshep at 6:40 in the morning this is day 10. And this was, I would say, by far the hardest trek. So all that snowfall the day before turned into ice and sleet, and it was brutally cold. There were loads of trekkers ascending through and descending through the extremely narrow iced trails. It was like ice. On top of that, you've got mules, you've got yaks. It just gets really crowded, and you've got to make sure you are focused and you're making sure that where you put your foot is solid ground because the trails are narrow. I can't tell you how excited and happy I was when we arrived at Gorakshep. I mean, that was just such a relief to me. So Gorakshep, now you are really high up there, and you are kind of focused on, EBC and everything else. The tea houses, I'll just mention really quickly, are really good. You even have hot showers at Lukla, Pakding, Namche Bazaar. But when you trek up to Gorakshep, there's no hot water. The toilet situation is really nasty. But, what you've got to do is focus on your task at hand, your eyes on the prize, EBC. I will recommend that you make sure you have some earplugs and eye mask so that you can get some rest, because that's what you want to focus on, is getting rest as much as you can. We arrived at Gorakshep. It was a short break, and then we started our trek to Kalapatar. So we did Kalapatar before we did Everest Base Camp. And Kalapatar actually has, the altitude of Kalapatar is higher. It's 18,188 feet. Again, this is, you getting up there, you're getting your last views of Everest Base Camp, and you're getting your last views, of Mount Everest. So when you're at EBC, you don't actually get really good views of Mount Everest. So you get really good views from Kalapatar. So once you do that, it's, then you come back and you sleep at Gorakshep. Next day, day 11, we woke up and the weather had cleared. It was a beautiful sunny day, and we started our trek to Everest Base Camp. About an hour into our trek, we experienced a big rock slide, which forced my husband to make a run for it, getting out of the way just in time as stones and rocks started rolling down the mountain. And in several places, the trail was actually blocked due to rock slides from the previous days. But again, you embrace the bistare, slowly, and you just make your trek to base camp. And all the efforts came together. We arrived base camp. It is 5,364 meters, 17,594 feet. We got to the rock. I wish they had more, like a better sort of a monument of you arriving, but it's just a big rock, and it was just somebody spray painted Everest Base Camp on it. And then we had another hour to trek because we were staying overnight at Everest Base Camp. And one of the things that surprised me about the base camp is it is much larger, or it was much larger. They've moved base camp since we trekked. They've moved it down because there was damage to base camp. And so base camp was much larger than I thought it was. Day 11 was also May 3rd, which was day 11 was my husband's birthday, and they baked a cake for him in the kitchen at EBC in like a pan. It was delicious, but our guide put 3 candles on the cake. And after the third time my husband blew out the candles, he was like, I can't do this anymore. Spending the night at EBC was absolutely a dream come true for me. Late at night, there was all this activity outside our tents where the climbers are going to Mount Everest and going to be climbing Mount Everest. They start ascending to Camp 1 from EBC. And that's because I think the Khumbu Glacier is like the most stable, or the ice fall is most stable at that time. So you do this in the middle of the night. And, you see headlamps bobbing throughout the glacier, which was like the coolest thing for me to see. The price of the trip was $1,890, which included $500 of spending an overnight at Everest Base Camp. Now, I talked about day 11, which was us spending the night there. Then we have days 12, 13, and 14, which were meant to be us trekking down. We kind of skipped all those days, and here's why. There were 2 other hikers who were using the same company as we were, and we learned from our guide that they wanted to take the helicopter down, or they were considering taking the helicopter down. The flight for the helicopter is $2,000. It was a flat amount. You can fit 5 people in the helicopter in addition to the pilot. So we decided, hey, maybe we should take the helicopter down because that would be another cool experience. Because there were only 4 of us, we split the $2,000 4 ways, and so it landed up being $500 per person. Taking the helicopter down was, yes, it is pricey. I will admit that it's pricey, but it was incredible. The views are spectacular. The experience is spectacular, and the way it happens is you do 2 helicopters, EBC down to a lower altitude first, and then a second helicopter, which goes from that lower altitude all the way down to Lukla. The pilots are trained specifically, and the choppers are different. The chopper that takes you down to a lower altitude is a different chopper and a different style of chopper. It can navigate through high winds. Whereas the chopper coming down to the lower altitudes doesn't need to be such a specialized helicopter. First of all, I got to sit next to the pilot, a female EBC helicopter pilot. I was completely in awe, and it was an incredible experience. And of course, my knees were ever so grateful that I didn't have to trek down. I was not looking forward to trekking down for 3 days in all the ice and snow that had already accumulated on the mountain in early May. So it was, if you get the chance to take the helicopter down, consider adding that as part of your journey. And again, I appreciate that it is expensive. It is your one trek, once in a lifetime trek. Now, because we took the helicopter down, we ended up spending 3 extra days in Lukla and looking around town, hanging out with the kids, and just enjoying Lukla, which is something we did not get to do on the front end. I mean, I don't imagine I will ever go to Lukla again unless I do another EBC trek. So if you do get the chance, just build in an extra day for Lukla. This was an experience of a lifetime, and I am so glad that I was able to check it off my bucket list, and my husband was also able to check it off his professional needs list. It was quite the experience. I would highly recommend Icicles Adventure Treks and Tours and Mrs. Indira Butt. She made sure that everything we needed done was taken care of. Thank you so much for your time. I am Radhika. This is Grooving and Giving in Early Retirement, the channel where we talk about living our best life in early retirement, giving back to our local and global communities, and the glue that holds it all together, financial freedom. In this video, we were grooving my epic trek to Everest Base Camp. Thank you so much. Namaste. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Ding, ding, ding. You know the drill.